Well, these are certainly interesting times we're living in. Global events and economic circumstances at home have made prices increase at their highest rate in over 40 years. This rapid rise in inflation is giving many people a layman's class in the realities of economics. Decades of loose monetary policy and tight energy regulation have now merged with health crises and geopolitical events to form a rapidly growing inflationary vortex. This impacts low and middle income families the most and could lead to greater political instability around the world. This is something we shouldn't fear, but if we're wise, we should be preparing for. Many are already looking for ways to combat inflation's impact on their wallets. Some are turning to homesteading and gardening to make themselves less reliant on our corporate and industrial food system. Others are rediscovering what nature has to offer to those interested in foraging through fields and forests. During the late winter and early spring months, there's a foraging opportunity literally surging through many trees that may be in your area. Maple trees begin their sap run at this time. This sap can be easily gathered and cooked to create maple syrup, something that can last all year when properly stored. Maple syrup is a straightforward project and is great entertainment for friends and family. It's a great chance to get outside as winter starts to fade, and we can get out and enjoy the outdoors once again. All you need to gather some sap from a tree is a drill, a spile, some food-grade line, and a food-grade bucket with a cover. When daytime temperatures are above freezing, with nighttime temps below freezing, the sap run is at its strongest. This will vary by latitude, but for the mid-eastern United States, the sap run is generally strongest in February or early March. To build your collection setup, simply drill a hole with a drill bit. You'll want to drill a hole about 1.5 inches to 2 inches deep into the bark, between waist and chest height on the tree. Tap your spile and ensure it's fully seated. If the run is in full swing, you might already see some sap coming out of the spile. But don't be surprised if sap doesn't begin running immediately. You can tap the tree up to 3 times, given it's about 2 feet in diameter, but for smaller trees, just tap once or twice. Next, plug in your tubing and run it into your covered bucket. I just drilled a hole in the bucket cover wide enough for the tubing and never had any debris or water get inside. For best results, gather the syrup every few days and refrigerate. You want to do this more frequently if you're getting warmer temps during the day. Gathering sap is kind of like brewing beer. It's best to keep bacteria growth to a minimum for the best taste. Be sure to use clean and sanitized equipment each season. After you tapped your trees, take a check around your property every few days to gauge progress. After a couple seasons, you'll be able to gather which trees produce better than others and at what temperature range the sap starts to run. In my experience, sometimes there's a wide variety in output between trees. And also, in my opinion, it's far better to tap your trees early than too late. Research suggests that there's little harm done in tapping your trees earlier in the season, but you'll never be able to collect the sap that you missed for being too late. Also be aware that some trees just produce more than others. This may be due to many factors such as the health of the tree, as well as local terrain and moisture levels. The process takes a little bit of trial and error at first, but after a couple seasons, you can identify your best trees and predictably gather gallons of sap used to process maple syrup. There's usually about a 40-to-1 or 50-to-1 sap to syrup ratio when it comes to maple trees, meaning you'll need to cook about 40 gallons of sap to generate 1 gallon of syrup. It may seem like a lot, but with a proper setup, it's certainly doable. This year was an experiment between different cooking methods. Keep in mind that cooking sap is generally an all-day affair, but usually doesn't require constant attention. Just be prepared with some patience and a beverage or two. As the sap is heated, excess water is removed, leaving a syrup of about 90% sucrose and 10% fructose and glucose. On a side note, maple syrup isn't just a sweetener. Unlike cheap pancake syrup made of high fructose corn syrup, maple syrup is rich in antioxidants and provides healthy levels of manganese, riboflavin, and copper. Overall, maple syrup is better for you in almost every way. It may not be a health food per se on its own, but it does a lot more for your body than store-bought pancake syrup made from high fructose corn syrup. Cooking usually doesn't require constant attention so long as the temperature is somewhat regulated and the sap doesn't start to boil over. This last season we tried a variety of cooking methods to see what worked best with what we had. We started out cooking with sap in a turkey fryer pot on a camp stove. While it worked well enough, much of the heat that was needed was redirected up the chimney. Nevertheless, after a few hours of cooking, we had evaporated about a third of the sap. Next, we placed the pot on a griddle over an open campfire. This method is more fuel intensive, and the wind played a factor in how well it did. But overall, having more direct heat from the flames seemed to do much better. Wanting to try for more efficiency, I built a rudimentary rocket stove out of brick and made another attempt. This seemed to work pretty well, and it certainly requires less fuel. If I'd used a larger and more airtight design, this could have likely done much better. There are more professional setups that you can go with. We decided to use what was on hand. To improve efficiency, do what the professional syrup makers do and use large shallow pans over a walled fire. This will increase the sap surface area and improve evaporation. Once the sap is boiled down to about the remaining 20%, you can cook it down to the appropriate consistency. This should occur when the sap reaches about 219 degrees. Just be sure to take the last part slow, or you could end up making maple candy instead of maple syrup. Once you have the desired texture, simply store it in your preferred container for immediate use, or you can can it for storage throughout the year. On the economical side, given the high price of maple syrup, you may be able to recoup some of your equipment costs after a couple of seasons. That is, given you gather enough syrup, keep things simple, and use off-grid heating methods. Using electricity or propane will add a significant amount of cost to the syrup given how much fuel is required and how long it must be cooked. Another thing you'll need to consider is the labor involved. Besides periodic inspection and gathering of syrup, there isn't much to do after the initial tapping of the trees. The volume of syrup you can cook will likely determine whether or not it makes much economic sense to do in the first place. If you're efficient and you have access to several quality trees, it's not difficult to make enough syrup to last a family or more throughout the year. Having the knowledge and experience to make jars of morale-boosting sweetener is a small reassurance when facing possible hard times ahead. In our age of constant distractions, it's nice to do something productive that makes you slow down and enjoy the outdoors. In the months ahead, Freedom Frontier will be starting our Field to Table series, rediscovering how to increase food security through foraging, hunting, fishing, and gardening. We'll see how the series goes, but I hope you'll find it both entertaining and informative. Please drop a comment if you have any improvements to the channel.